Perfect. Good. Good morning, everybody. And welcome to the final conference of the Boost project, building social and emotional skills to boost mental health resilience in children and young people in Europe. I'm Michele Calabro, and I forgot to have the switcher. There you go. I'm Michele Calabro. I'll be the director, be the moderator for today. I'm the director of EURIGA, European Regional and Local Health Authorities, and one of the partners of the Boost project. I prefer the colors. Now it works? Ah, there you go. Okay, perfect. Probably people online didn't listen to a single word I said so far, but anyway, we are here. Thanks a lot to all the speakers to begin with. And in doing so, I would actually like to invite the first speaker of the day, Sarah Brazis, is from the Commission and the project officer of the Boost project. Sarah, please welcome on stage.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests and participants, both here and at home or in their offices online, I just want to say a warm welcome to Boost's final conference. My name is Sarah Brazis. I am the project advisor that was managing Boost for almost since its beginnings, and I am from the Health and Digital Executive Agency established by the European Commission in 2021. So I just wanted to say that is a great pleasure to be here with you today as we celebrate the European Mental Health Week and also the culmination of Boost's final journey, or could it be the beginning of Boost's new journey? So before we go into the very interesting program that was shown in the agenda, I just wanted to take a small moment, and I'll be very brief, to reflect on the significance of the occasion of today, and on Boost's work as well. So Boost is a very good example of EU collaboration, dedication to mental health research. And as such, and as you can see in the posters, and you will hear in the sessions, Boost is one of the main aims, or the main aim, is to look into social and emotional well-being and skills of youth in schools. And research indeed shows that promoting social and emotional well-being in our younger generation promotes and creates a huge impact on their lives to come. And here schools play a critical role in shaping up the mental health of our young kids and adolescents. So the Commission, through the research framework programs such as Horizon Europe and now Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020, has been very dedicated to funding mental health research, and it has been committed to look into the full spectrum of research, from basic research, also looking into understanding the mental health disorders, risk factors, and coming up with new and innovative solutions, both for individuals, communities, and also healthcare. And looking into Horizon Europe in particular, the scope of research supported has been widened and adapted to the new challenges in our society. So if you look into the work programs, you're going to see opportunities for funding that are looking into the interplay between mental health and also, for example, determinants of health as climate change, urbanization, the consequences of increasingly digitalized society, and also, for example, the consequences of new workplaces post-pandemic. But coming back to the event today and closing this parenthesis into my last words, I just wanted to encourage you to share your ideas and to share your expertise to actively participate. There's going to be very interesting sessions, and also to not only celebrate Boost's accomplishments, but also make sure that together we are looking to continue creating a society when mental health is prioritized and it's supported and better understood. So thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you all a very nice, interesting and productive conference. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Indeed, it's important to have, of course, the support of the Commission in this type of activities, as it's essential to bring forward also the results of the project after the project ends. So thanks a lot for being here with us, opening today. And next step, we have a presentation from the coordinator of the Boost project, Stine. Stine works at Sintef, Norway. And please, do you come on stage? You have a few slides to introduce the Boost project to everybody, and I'll give you.
Thank you, Michele. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the project so you know what we're talking about here for the rest of the day, the background and a little bit about what we've done. And you'll hear more about the development of the Boost approach a bit later on today. As Michele said, just remind us what the project's title is: Building Social and Emotional Skills to Boost Mental Health Resilience in Children and Young People in Europe. As Sarah said, we responded to an EU call promoting mental health and well-being in the young. We were one of 5 projects that were funded under this call. This whole initiative started a long time ago, actually. It started way back in 2016. And it came from Viken County Council, or Buskerud County Council actually at the time, and Modum, who are partners in the project. So the initiative for the project came from them. They had seen the call and they had felt that it responded really well to their priorities. So it's a nice background to the project. This was way back in 2016. We started discussing what the project could be about. We looked for partners. We developed the idea, and finally in 2018, we started the project. So it was a long process, a year and a half before the project started. So the aim of the project is to create an approach that targets school staff, and the idea is for school staff to be strengthened in their ability to promote social and emotional learning in school children. We decided to work in primary schools, not because this topic is not relevant in other school levels. And this topic is highly important from birth and throughout childhood, but just to have an arena to work in that was comparable across the countries. And the idea is to boost, finally, the mental health of school children. So the consortium of this project is, Sintef is leading the consortium, myself together with Gloria Zaldi. We are coordinators, and we're also leading 2 work packages. And we have Poznan University in Poland, who's a partner, also leading 2 work packages. Our partners from University of Cordoba in Spain are leading 2 work packages. We've got Viken County Council, who are leading 1 work package. Eurega, that you've seen here today, is leading the work package on dissemination, and we've got Modum Municipality, who are school owners of the schools in Norway. So the project consists of 9 work packages. We started with a formative study, and Robert will tell you more about the formative study and the development of the Boost approach later on. So the idea was for the formative study to give us a research basis for developing the Boost approach. And then the development of the Boost approach and the implementation of the Boost approach are 2 different work packages. And also there was several effectiveness or studies of the effectiveness of the approach. So one that looked at the implementation itself, the process evaluation. One that's looked at the actual effectiveness of the approach on school children. And one that's looked at the economical aspects. And then we've got a very important work package. Oh, we've got work package 7, which is, for instance, organizing this event here today. And we've got a work package on exploitation, which is more how can we use both the boost approach, but also findings from the boost project to influence policy and practice. And that work package has been led by Viken in Norway. So just a little bit of background, we talk about social and emotional learning, but I wanted just to take us to what exactly is social and emotional learning. And there are several different frameworks that we can go by when we talk about social and emotional learning. And at the core, they're quite similar. Many of you will probably know the LifeComp framework, the European framework. We've also got CASEL, which is very well known. And there are other frameworks through the OECD, UNICEF, and others. So basically, what these frameworks talk about are these 3 major competencies: personal, social, and learning to learn competencies. And under each of these, there are, of course, smaller competencies, or such as self-regulation, and those you can see here. So the goal of working with social and emotional learning is to improve mental health of children, increase their well-being, and strengthen them in life and their resilience. And why is that important? Well, it's important because we know that children who have these competencies, who are strong in these competencies, they have increased well-being, and we know this from research. And that's both in the short and in the long term. We know that they do better in school. So working well with this in school makes children more susceptible to learning. And we know that children who do well in school and who have increased well-being will also do well in life in general. So that's very good arguments, very good research arguments for working with social and emotional learning. And also I wanted to say a little bit about the research foundation of the BOOST project. I mean, this goes all the way back to when we wrote the proposal, when we said, why should we work with this? And we know that current CEL programs there are a lot of good CEL programs out there. And many schools throughout Europe work with social and emotional learning. But we know that current programs can be quite time consuming, which compromises academic teaching. And we know that often they're implemented by experts who come from outside. And as such, they're not integrated into the teaching of the school and the school environment. And they're not sufficiently anchored at school level. And we know that the best social and emotional learning programs are more promotive and preventive. So rather than deal with problems, they try and prevent problems. They take on a whole school approach. So all school staff are involved in social and emotional learning work. And they are integrated into mainstream school life and implemented by all school staff. So this was at the core of our project. This is what we started the whole BOOST project with, this foundation. And then Robert will take you from there when he gives a presentation of the BOOST approach later. So the BOOST project started in January 2018. We spent the first 2 years doing the formative study, developing the approach. And by the time we were ready to implement the approach, which was January 2020, as you all know, March 2020 came, everything changed. The world changed, the BOOST project changed. We had sort of an initial approach. We had all this, we wanted to introduce to the schools, and we sort of got to introduce it before the schools closed down. So to put it mildly, it was less than optimal for the project. COVID was very inconvenient, but for many reasons. So we've struggled through with COVID. The implementation has not been as we had wanted, but we've managed to kind of introduce different versions of the BOOST approach to the schools. We've managed to get good feedback from the schools on what's important, and we've managed to make changes. And we are here today with a final BOOST approach, which is open. It's on an online platform. Robert will tell you about it. And you can also go and look at the online platform and download everything from the approach. So here we are, final conference. The project is coming to an end. Our main work now is actually the question mark work package 8 is kind of work package 8 tells us is the work package that helps us to bring this project into policy and practice. And that's the work that continues from now on. How can we make sure this is relevant, what we've done for 5.5 years? So that's our work from now on. And with that, I say thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stina. Indeed, today is the final conference, but it's the beginning of the efforts that actually have been starting quite some time ago already in trying to include Boost in several activities, also the European Union level. It was included as a best practice in the non-communicable disease initiative of the Commission. So hopefully, there's the ground for some good work on the Boost project. But now, let me actually introduce our next speaker, MEP Maya Walsh from Ireland. Please come in. So, well, I don't think you need much introduction, of course, because you've been one of the most active in mental health at the European Parliament. So thanks a lot, actually, for all the activities that you do. And we're just very pleased to have you here.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. What a beautiful space to discuss mental health. The Parliament should look like this more and more often. But I just want to say thanks very much for having me. I always laugh at the photographs that get put up. Yeah, what reality looks like is yeah. I often say when I speak to schools, particularly young teenagers, in a joking way, I was like, this is what happens when you join politics, and then this is the reality of it. But often that doesn't do well for anybody's mental health, so I try and curb that. But I just want to say good morning to you all. How's everybody's mental health doing? Doing okay? Great, we're getting some thumbs up. I won't ask my senior staffer Neve how her mental health is doing, because we work very, very hard on raising awareness for mental health. For me, it's incredibly important that this is a fundamental piece of the work that we do at a European level. And I've been asked just to give you a little bit of an overview on the type of work we're doing, some reports that are going through. If you look like you're falling asleep, I'll wrap it up and then part ways. But ultimately, what I hope to hear from you all as you go out throughout the day and hopefully after, just some of the impact that you are finding from the Boost program, what we as policymakers need to be doing more, or I don't think less of, but probably more of, and then just to get an overall sense of the organisations that you're representing, and the type of Europe ultimately that our young people want to live in. And I think that's the fundamental point here. To take you through a little bit of the numbers, and again, I'm always conscious, those that are watching online, those that are in the room, work within this space every day, all day. So excuse my ignorance as I'm about to kick back some statistics that either you have offered us in the European Parliament or you're working within every day. But when I speak to people, in particular other policymakers right across the European Union and indeed across the world, these numbers are awful, not always the welcomed, because they're the reality. So when we look at 1 in 6 people across our EU had a mental health issue in 2016, that's a total of 84 million people, and yet mental health is never on the discussion table at a policy level, at the level that I wish it needs to or it deserves. I think since, as was mentioned, the beloved COVID entered into our lives, I think a lot of us woke up to the fact that each and every one of us has mental health, and we have different aspects in dealing with that. But fundamentally, does our younger people have the skill set and the supports to develop? These realities, I think COVID taught us what fear looked like, what worry looked like, what stress looked like, and that good mental health is everything. But what does good mental health mean if you don't have the skill set? So I'm really, really delighted to, I think it was Patrick, no pressure. Is it Patrick? Yeah, Robert, sorry, no pressure, Robert, on sharing the insights later on. I heard you shout from the back, don't offer too much, but pressure is on for that. But really, without it, we struggle to cope, adapt, solve problems, and ultimately maintain a good quality of life, a life that we choose versus one that is chosen for us, I think is incredibly important. The growing burden on mental health caused by the crisis and the many crises that we deal with, not just COVID, but before and after COVID, has referenced as a silent or a second pandemic, and ultimately nobody deserves to suffer in silence. In Ireland, we don't have a very good track record of discussing mental health, and we haven't for many, many years. And when I talk to other policymakers at a national and local level, I talk about the silent pandemic, the one that many has been carrying, post-traumatic stress, years of large T, small t traumas, years of not talking about something even though everybody's feeling it and seeing it. And that's where I kind of lead into the fact of where I'm coming from and who I am, bar trying to make you laugh on a Tuesday morning. And failing miserably at it. But let me just give a brief intro. Maria Walsh is my name. I am Ireland's, I really like to claim because it helps my mental health, I'm Ireland's youngest MEP. Yesterday I was in a school and I asked young people how old I looked and they said 65 to 70. So I did get one kid saying 19 and I gave her homework off for the year. But I guess you're not allowed to do that in schools these days. But for me, I'm a member of the Parliament. I first mandate, potentially my last, no I kid. God, I'm really failing on these jokes here, so I'm going to stop. But my constituency is Midlands Northwest. So I cover, if anybody knows Ireland, I cover half of Ireland bar Northern Ireland. So it's a big constituency, very diverse, urban, rural, extreme rural, different levels, sadly, of poverty, particularly for our young people. Just yesterday, I was in a school and quite a big area in Mullingar in Westmeath, just in the middle of the heart of my constituency. And there was young kids enjoying nurture hours. And by that is a program that the school found themselves in. As young people coming into their schools were not having one-on-one time with an adult that they felt safe with, an adult that they felt seen with. And here in 2023, we have young kids right across the European Union, not just in my constituency of Ireland, not having adequate that one-on-one time that I think we all need to be seen and be heard and feel safe. And as I mentioned, quite a diverse area, about 1.1, 1.2 million people based off the last census. And I sit in the European People's Party here in the Parliament, and then at an Irish level, I sit in a governmental party called Fine Gael. And I say that because my party has been at the helm of the government for the last 10 years. Insert someone like myself who feels like we're failing drastically at mental health resources. So for full transparency, I absolutely name and shame when I need to at a national level, because if we're not calling it out, then it's fundamentally our younger people that are suffering by not having one good adult in their life, making it known that they're suffering. For me, mental health and well-being is an issue that has remained at the very forefront of my my political journey from the very beginning in 2018, 2019, and actually many years before that. I grew up as shared in a very small rural community in the west coast of Ireland called Shrule. And when I was about 14, 15, sadly, a member of our very small community died by suicide. His daughter was in my class, and yet nobody talked about it. And I was always enamored at nobody speaking about something that fundamentally was having an impact on people's lives. And from that, my eyes were awoken to the many different types of conversations we don't talk about. I'm also a member of the LGBTI plus community. And again, growing up in that space, again, having another type of topic that nobody also discussed. And the emotional impact that had, and the emotional impact that had on not just myself, but those around me too. So for me and my team, because we come as a we, it's really, really important that when I did get elected and we did start working on different committees like the Employment and Social Affairs, Culture and Education, the Justice and Home Affairs Committee, those 3 committees, that within that, everything we touched has a mental health aspect to it, from entrepreneurs to our skills and training, to how we educate in terms of a European education area, to those that are coming into the European Union through the movement of people, through migration, that they have the adequate mental health supports as they're coming in, and not just relying on someone to see them at some point in their journey, calling the European Union their home or forever home. For me, mental health does not just consist of mental illness or mental health struggles. It refers to everyone's mind, as I mentioned earlier. And just like everyone has a body, this question actually, or this line, came from a young person that I met about a year ago who couldn't understand why we talk about physical health every January, but never mental health fitness every January. And I thought that was an incredible point, particularly for those that perhaps like myself kick off on January 1st with this new goal of doing various things, but actually ignoring the fact that if we had positive mental health, that conversation would be a little bit nicer and a little bit sweeter to ourselves. So I always mention it in anything that I have, and that came again at the heart of a young person who shared that with me. Unfortunately, though, when we don't talk about this, it also means that everyone can experience mental health struggles, and we know that is predominantly in silence when it comes to young people in particular. One statistic that I hope you might let me know is true or not. In our own research, it very much is, from the WHO and UNICEF, but one that I keep sharing in rooms, and I'm just waiting for someone to say that's not true anymore, but sadly I don't think that will come without the brave work that you are all doing. And that is, suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death among 10 to 19-year-olds in our European Union. 2nd leading cause of death. And of that same age, 9 million of young people are living with mental health disorders such as anxiety, depression, accounting for more than half those cases. And that's before I even get into eating disorders, physical harm, and unfortunately I can say, etc., etc. In the 2022 Health at a Glance report by OECD, amongst half of young Europeans report unmet needs for mental health care. And the number of young people reporting depression symptoms in several EU countries more than doubled during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the sad thing is, and I know the work of Boost, we can see some data, we just can't see it all. So we can only imagine that this is even more than what I'm sharing now. I had the opportunity, just to give you a little bit of, anybody who's not interested in European work in the Parliament, I'm going to give you a heads up to close your eyes for just a few minutes if you want to catch some Z's. But I had the opportunity to work directly on a file dedicated to making cyber violence a form of gender-based violence, which was extremely intrigued by the conversations that I had with many Irish and European mental health organisations on this issue, because we do know it feeds into it greatly. And one of the most important takeaways for me was from that report was how incidents of cyber violence or online harassment cannot be separated from instances in the real world. And that was many requests, particularly from younger people, with the majority of surveys on cyberbullying usually show that 10 to 15% of children have been bullied online. But when you ask younger people, including teenagers, if they have ever had nasty comments said about them online, many of them throw this flippant remark of, oh, all the time. It's a part of our online world. And yet, direct correlation to the 2nd leading cause of death of young people right now is our suicide. People who are regularly targeted online bullies suffer both emotionally and socially, that we know. Not only do they find it hard to make friends, but they also struggle to maintain healthy friendships, both romantic and platonic relationships. I think that's important to decipher there and share. The consequences of being bullied by peers can have great impact on the individual's mental health very well into adulthood, and we know that from those who are stepping into the mental health space later years in terms of talk therapies or different types of therapies that suit them. And with cyberbullying, because it can be done from behind a screen, there's less and less options and opportunities for intervention. The reason I brought that up is 2 weeks ago in the Parliament in Strasbourg, we heard from a woman called Jackie Fox, a mum. An Irish woman whose daughter Nicole had suffered such extreme torment online and offline leading up to the years of 2018 that sadly took her own life because of it. Jackie's dedication for campaigning for such resulted in Coco's Law being brought into at a national level in Ireland, and what we're aiming to do is bring this across Europe, ensuring that what is a crime offline is made a crime online. And I share that with this particular audience to see if there's appetite within your own organizations or whatever member state you might be representing or coming from, that perhaps we too can work together and making sure that a reality for our younger people. But as I speak, thousands of young people are living with cyberbullying, being threatened with violence, being told to end their own lives, just as Nicole Fox was many years ago. And this is one example where our young people are facing that extreme pressure, where they need guidance and support in caring for their mental health and well-being. The world of online is not disappearing, so therefore we have to have better suits to support them through that. Just to quickly bring back to Boost, because I know there's so many incredible work being done there, and something that is incredibly, the word I typed here is useful, but incredibly important and significant to us as policymakers. I think school kids are missing out on the care from dedicated trained staff in our schools. I can say that from my own constituency, on understanding how to listen to their body, their minds, and how to manage their own mental health, knowing where to go when they need to, and knowing how to support another when that other person also needs to. And I really want to give credit to the social and emotional learning programs under Boost, because they create innovative approaches in order to strengthen social and emotional skills among children and young people in schools. And as I was reading a lot about it, I was like, darn, I wish I had that when I was young, because just how much more comfortable one would be in sharing their emotional strength, and on the difficult days, knowing again where to go and what to do when they need it the most. As a member of the Culture and Education Committee, I often work on reports involving children and their education. I just wanted to flag this last committee work with you. And as mentioned at the outset, I always reference work around mental health, and school and classroom environments can provide such positive outcomes. But within the Parliament, we often discuss how we can use education to improve our citizen participation, our democracy, as well as promoting and protecting the well-being of our children. And I have to again give credit to Boost, because it gives weight to arguments that mental health must be considered in all areas of policy. And there was no one more excited when our Commissioner for Health was appointed, a child psychologist by trade. And I remember Stella Kyriakides saying in her at her hearing, when I asked, and several MEPs asked about mental health, that it would be a thread throughout every piece of policy. And I have to give credit to her, because she really, really does try and implement that in. And this is a shout out to the Commission. I'm very much excited and looking forward to next month's presentation or ideas around what that citizen dialogue will look like. And again, anybody in this room, if there's things at a Parliament level we need to be feeding into that, please let it be known, because it is this shared space where we have a shared European Union when it comes to our young people, in particular in their mental health. Just finally, this is where the page is. I think my team likes to haze me when I make speeches like this, but I just want to say, you know, policymakers and perhaps programs like Boost are never 100% finished. They're always evolving, like everybody's mental health. But they can evolve positively if we share positively and offer that critique when the critique is needed. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what worked, what didn't work, in order to impact others. And if we do not have the data or the understanding of what you're doing, then we simply are working in silo, and ultimately it is that young person that's suffering the ill effects of that. I must say, though, more and more politicians are understanding Europeans, their citizens' mental health, and they need to be at the heart of policy. And I think that's an exciting term. It took a few years. Sadly, it took a pandemic, but we're now at it, and we need to keep that pressure on. So just for anybody in the room, if you mind me getting political just for just a second, we're about a year away from the European elections. I promise I'm going to wrap up because I'm saying I'm well over my time. But we're a year away from the European elections. And I ask for everybody, we need to coordinate it, be it a manifesto signing or every MEP that's running, be it the 705 who are elected or the thousands who are put their hands up right across the 27 member states to make sure mental health is within their mandate and their policy that they're putting forward to run. Again, I'm saying this to a converted room, but if there's things that we need to be doing in order to put that pressure on the new MEPs or the seasoned MEPs that are reapplying for this honourable position, please let me know how we can work better. Within the Alliance and the coalition in the Parliament, this is what we're working on now, but I cannot stress enough, for me, if no MEP is not putting on an EU mental health strategy is needed yesterday, not just tomorrow, then we are failing our citizens, particularly that's a horrific statistic of the second leading cause of death right now is death by suicide for our young people. I'll finish up there. There's so much more, but I'm really, really conscious I've eaten into too much time. But I just want to end with a sentence that I said in October 2019 at our first meeting for the Mental Health Alliance, and it's, without mental health, we cannot have a solid health base. Mental health doesn't see borders. It doesn't see a person's skin color or mother tongue or creed. It certainly doesn't see their orientation or gender. And it doesn't see where one community starts and ends. It does not see where our European Union is growing into, and it certainly doesn't see north, south, east, and west. It's our citizens that are at risk if we don't get this right. And you and I know both very well, and those online, mental health is everyone's business. As we say in Ireland, thank you very much, Gurmila Mila Mahagat. And I really look forward to this not just being a one-stop talking shop for myself as a policymaker, that we continue on this conversation. Mind your mental health for the rest of the day. Beautiful space, decent weather outside, and know that you have a champion in a number of politicians in the European Parliament. So please tap into that resource. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Maria. I mean, just great to hear from you. Great to hear about the commitment, and definitely we also play our part as Boost Consortium, as Eureka, as all the consortium partners in connecting to you on anything that would be helpful to bring mental health forward in the way that we can. And this afternoon we also talk with some of our colleagues from Mental Health Europe as well, from the Commission, as we already working with a lot of partners to do so. So fingers crossed, we'll help out. But going forward with the first session of the day, actually, we have, we've been talking about the Boost approach quite a lot. So Robert, it's actually your time to shine. We'll have an introduction indeed with a short presentation on the Boost approach. What is it? And then we'll have a panel discussion with several members of the consortium and part of our advisory board member. But Robert, please.
Thank you very much for, this is a sophisticated device. Can you operate on it? Green button and red button, 2 buttons, damn it. Just in case of power failure, you won't get rid of me because all the presentation is here. So the main thing for me right now is that I fully agree that what is mainly challenge right now is my emotional skills and emotional control. So cell is really relevant. So would you be so, should I really press this button? Okay, it's the green one.
Yeah, it's the green one.
Okay, it's the green one. And talking about the mental health, I think I am on the edge of schizophrenia because there's left screen and right screen, and my mind is split already. So I am not sure if I can handle it. Oh, by the way, right now I discovered, when you started your presentation, Sina, you read you said the full title of our project without a single mistake, and your back was turned against the slide. And that's the trick. After 6 years, I still can't repeat it. And you just, wow, I'm impressed. So hello, everyone. We prepared this little presentation together. Eva is sitting there. She is a sociologist from University of Wrocław. She is the director of the Institute of Sociology, and I'm Robert Torkowski. Nice to meet you again. So the first slide tells us I'm supposed to talk about boost approach. What does it mean for me, actually, boost approach? I wrote here the main aims, but for me personally, as we were talking about it, as we were researching it, etc., for me, it is all mainly about interpersonal sensitivities, about us all trying to listen to each other more carefully, maybe at times take the perspective of the another person. And if we manage to spread this interpersonal style around, and if we manage to infect this with this virus of the kids, maybe the world and interpersonal communication will change a little bit for better. And then the main issue is the empowerment of teachers equals the empowerment of pupils. Again, the green one. Thank you. In terms of the boost approach methodology, I know nothing about methodology, but there's this smart slide here. So we started with the literature review, and we basically tried to identify the effective components of cell approaches as we were basically looking around in the world, what is happening in the world literature. Then what we did in terms of policies, I listened carefully to what you're saying. I know that there exist policies. We did the comparison of the educational policies in our 3 countries. And the main point, without going into details, is that they all realize that it's a significant issue, that it's worth focusing on it, it's worth working on it, and it's worth to try to make some changes without going into details. Then we did the qualitative research, and we did the individual interviews, we did the group focus interviews, and we were mainly focusing on the population of teachers, students, and we tried to get the sense of crucial, essential issues from this population. So this is a tiny bit of methodology. What were the key conclusions from the formative study that we did? That the characteristics of effective cell approach, or approaches, because there are many of them, is the flexibility. It means that whoever tries to do it is supposed to take into consideration the individual space, the culture of school, and be adaptable and flexible about it. That it is not enough just to inject one shot, make a brief workshop or something like that. The input has to be systematic. It has to be part of daily practice, or ideally it would become a part of the culture of specific place. And then the whole school approach, I think Ida is the person who really is into the stuff, and we are aware of it, and we try to engage every person. I know that teachers are crucial, kids are crucial, but sometimes a peripheral person can, by the negative input, damage the climate of the place, and it's pretty irreversible or difficult to change. So it's worth to remember about it. And then the specific needs of the school staff regarding cell help in organization, access to set of cell tools. We were preparing such tools, and then we cooperated with teachers. We are working on the manual that contains tools, and then the further support. It's mentioned already on the posters around, and no point to dwell on it, but the CASEL is a relevant frame of reference for us. And I just put it, we did put it on the slide because CASEL is not a deus ex machina, it's not something that exists surprisingly. Suddenly it's a part of, it grew up rooted in humanistic psychology, where the frontline man is Carl Rogers, or it refers to emotional intelligence, and the popular name is Daniel Goleman. Just to mention briefly, it seems like the self-awareness and the self-management are the crucial skills that they're supposed to have. I hope I have some. And then the social awareness and then the relational skills are extremely relevant. So we know about it, I won't dwell on it. What about the innovation of our boost approach? The main issues here is that it is based on the resources of each school. That is, it is interconnected with the school priorities and values. So it was mentioned already, Arian all, as I mentioned, the flexibility. It's compatible with the school adopted prophylactic and educational programs. It encourages the cooperation and co-creation of staff members. It's present in everyday school life. So it's not an extraordinary thing that happens only on a special occasion. And it really focuses on the not only on the formal dimension, but on the non-formal dimension. And the non-formal chats and the discussion arenas are crucial for the transfer of the information and growth of the stuff. And I think we will also have heaps of possibility to have this informal, non-formal discussions today. Now I feel like I should have something to drink. It's water. No, water, no. Come on. No, it's not very healthy. Sorry. How about the boost approach implementation? I mean, there's this graph here, but basically we were thinking, and the whole idea hovers around the issue of increased knowledge, of gaining knowledge, rethinking, thinking about the old things in new way, and then about trying to practice it, and then about trying to reflect on it, talk, share, and then there's the assumption that altogether in circles, going around and around, it will make us move forward. The another slide just adds to what the previous one said. In terms of the changes in process of cooperation of our project, it seems like we started as researchers and we were playing a role of initiators and provocateurs sometimes, I think, and guides and observers. And then on the school side, we had quite a significant amount of skepticism, but then it seems like we managed, am I right, to some extent to move it from this skeptical position into evoking and creating, waking up the soul of creators, co-creators and initiators, etc. So it changed, the general shift moved into positive direction, so it seems. However, it depends on schools. For example, in Poland, we had school that was excellent, that the self vibe was there and the cooperation was excellent. And then we had so-so school. So it depends. Not everything can be so shiny. We can also mention that there's dark side of the moon. Am I allowed to mention that? Thank you very much. This is actually a slide that I stole from Stina. It's very complex. I'm not sure if I have the right understanding of it, but what is my point? That we started, for example, with the idea that the main stuff around our project will be the functioning of the platform and material placed on the platform. And what we learned quite quickly is that there was not such an enthusiastic reaction or engagement. Or in Poland, we had problems like people had the problem to log in and they lost the passwords, you know, especially people as young as me. And so it didn't work too well. So we learned that actually what saved the project, at least in Poland, was the interpersonal communication, interpersonal relationship. Agata did a lot of extra work hanging on the phone, meeting people, for coffees and not only, and try to maintain the relationships, because the virtual relationships actually didn't work, but the real face-to-face relationships worked. So we changed from the concept of platform into 5 steps. When the vehicle of interpersonal connection was real face-to-face contact and workshops and things like that, and not the internet platform. Just to mention the 5-step approach, the first step is about trying to involve your school. It's about trying to kickstart whatever is the boost all about. And then to map strengths and needs and challenges. And then develop goals and ideas for solutions. And then make up a plan. And then carry out, adjust, and continue. And we hope that even as we finish the project, maybe it will continue, maybe it will go on. In terms of the broader social context, I know that it's not my point to talk about it, but we spoke about it and we actually agreed that I will mention it. That, for example, in Poland, there are heaps of contextual factors that have a tremendous impact and had tremendous impact on our project. For example, beginning with the status of teachers, financial status. Teachers, all my life I hear that in Poland nurses and teachers are overworked and underpaid, and it didn't change much. And I live already almost 60 years. So, it's not such a bright side of the moon again. As we were working on our project, the Polish teachers went on strikes. We had, I think, at least 2 waves of strikes that interfered with our project. And teachers were really focusing on the professional survivals, or they kind of put on hold the issues related to projects and stuff like that. They were focused on something else, on something different, on the professional survival. Then we had the COVID pandemic, and then on the top of it, we should start with it, the war in Ukraine. And for example, we have a major influx of immigrants, and not only adults, but we have in Poland heaps of youngsters, kids from Ukraine. They entered Polish educational system. The problem starts with the crowded classes, then interpersonal issues, then cultural differences. So we have really a difficult, challenging situation where paradoxically it seems like the self skills are absolutely crucial to manage this challenging and difficult situation. So maybe we are at the right moment. It's really a sad, tragic story that we have a war, but at the same time, we have an opportunity to think, reflect, and maybe change something about it. And then in terms of the changes of the boost, as it was mentioned earlier on, maybe we managed to change a little bit in a positive direction from skepticism to inspiration. Maybe in spite of virtual reality dominating our life, we learned the lesson that the virtual reality is not always our favorite space for interpersonal connection, and that maybe it's good to meet face to face, personalize the contact with other people, do the workshops that create a interesting space for encounters, interesting conversations. And that from assumptions, we move through trial and error to innovation. And I think I quoted you, because you emphasized it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Robert. Great to have the overview of the boost approach. And now actually we're going to discuss it a little bit with several colleagues from the consortium. So I'll just call on stage Agata from AWF Poznan. Please come over. Gloria from SIMTEF, Eva from the University of Cordoba, and Niels, who was actually following the project since the very beginning as part of the advisory board. I'll give you. Yes, please. I'll now mix things up, and I hope all microphones will work. We should. So there you go. I'll give one each. Perfect. All right. Excellent. So for today, basically, we already touched what's the boost approach in general, but actually now we experience that in several different contexts that we would like to have that overview for everybody in the audience and online. And Gloria, maybe I would like to start with you. You work, of course, in the Norwegian environment. So what can you emphasize from what you've seen in terms of the boost approach in your environment, in terms of what's the specific context told you, basically, in working on it and developing?
Yes. Is it on? Yeah. Context in this project has been following us all. I mean, context has been very important in this project. Starting from the aim of the project, we knew that if we wanted to create a sustainable social emotional learning approach, we would have to tackle the context of each country. And we would focus on sustainability because that was one of the main limitations of social emotional learning programs out there. That was the aim. And then when we started the implementation of the boost approach, context was what determined the different strategies that we used to implement the approach in the 3 countries. We listened to what schools wanted and the school owners wanted, and then we implemented differently. So in Spain and Poland, the implementation was a combination of, like Robert mentioned, of physical meetings. It was always from the beginning thought that it would be a combination of physical meetings and workshops and an online platform for support. Whereas in the Norwegian context, it was decided that we would rely solely on the online platform. This created a distance from the schools. And like Robert mentioned, contact. But this created a distance which influenced how schools decided how they understood the boost approach, its goals and its research aims. It was very unclear for schools because of this distance. And also it affected, COVID did not help. And the online platform itself, of course, like Robert mentioned, didn't help because it had accessibility issues. It was difficult for schools to access because it was password protected. But it also influenced the distance influenced the acceptability of the approach itself, actually. So it influenced that and the buy-in of the approach into schools. So that was the Norwegian context. It was very different, but also context also influenced the development of the approach. We knew, since we were trying to create something that would be sustainable in the school environment, we listened in the formative study to what schools were telling us they wanted. And like Robert also mentioned, they said they wanted competence development. They wanted more development, competence in social emotional learning and skills, and also social emotional tools as well. But in developing the approach, we also said for it to be sustainable, we would have to include organizational learning aspect to it. We had to do it for it to be sustainable. It would have to, in order for it to be infiltrate schools, basically. So in the development context was also very present. And what the Norwegian context provided for us with the distance was that we saw really early on that we would not be able to provide all schools with all learning opportunities which they needed, nor provide all schools with all the social emotional learning tools that they would need for all circumstances. So that made us change the focus of how we developed the Boost approach from being equal partners of a competence module and a tool module and an organizational learning module to lift up the organizational learning module and incorporate the competence and the tools so that schools could make it their own. So the competence was, I mean, context was very, very important for this project. I think it's very much in, I think in the makeup of the project, the gene of the project throughout.
Thanks a lot, Gloria. And indeed, no, absolutely, you can keep it. And I'm coming to you now, Agatha. I mean, Robert also like talk about context a little bit, but what in terms of the context that you experience in developing, you know, and working on the project?
From my perspective, the Boost approach was functioning differently in each school. And the way in which the approach worked depended on many different internal and external factors. Robert mentioned about external factors. The teacher strike, it was the biggest teacher strike in Polish education, and the pandemic 19, especially Polish children were taught remotely for most longer than children in other countries, and the war in Ukraine. The Polish schools accepted Ukrainian children who were afraid of war, and there were children with trauma. The political situation was very reinforced by the media and caused depression and anxiety of Polish children too, who were afraid of war. And the internal factors that affected the Boost approach in Polish context were the number of school staff and the number of children, especially children with special needs, with disabilities, and Ukrainian children, and atmosphere and organizational context at school differently, and especially from my perspective, the management style and charisma of head teachers. It's the most important.
Thanks a lot, Agatha. I mean, the more we go ahead, the complex the picture becomes, because there's so many elements, internal, external factors, cultural, different way the system is organized. So we're now actually going to look at the third country that was involved in the Boost discussion. So Eva from the University of Cordoba in Spain. What happened, let's say, in Spain in working on Boost?
Yes. I would like to highlight firstly that the Spanish educational context has a relative long experience in the study and promotion of healthy social relationship, specifically about the word convivencia that we use. And there is also a government support to attend the well-being of children. Despite these relevant advances, problems of suicidal ideation, cyberbullying, cyberhate, school violence, discrimination, and humiliation is require all of educational attention. The Boost approach has been an alternative in Spanish schools, different from the current socio-emotional learning programs for different reasons. It has been a real transfer experience between theory and practice, a pending challenge in our educational system. We are used to unidirectional models in which researchers transmit scientific evidence to professionals, evidence that sometimes is really difficult to put in practice in schools. The Boost approach in our case has been the development of a practice-based design in which researchers and educational professionals have worked collaboratively to achieve a common goal. One of the main innovation also has been the training of teachers in the decision-making processes to promote social and emotional competence in their schools. This has been a challenge and at the same time a difficult from the implementation of the boost. In Spain, teachers are used to receive external program with specific activities that they apply in classrooms. For some schools, to have to decide what, why, how, to put in practice different action to promote mental health, it has not been easy. So in the middle of an intervention, we have to adapt this model based on a learning companion to a more research-directed model, designing some activities and guides about how to use the different resources. And additionally, BOOST has provided an opportunity to implement the whole school approach. In Spanish school, in practice, social and emotional learning is responsible only for some teachers. And the fact that all adults in the schools take the responsibility in the implementation of BOOST has been very innovative and very valued by them. No? And also we have to have in mind that the different level of motivation of teachers has been very important. Some of them have previous experiences working with socio-emotional competence and wanted to continue improving. Others value socio-emotional competence, but they don't know how. And for others, it was something that was beyond the responsibility. In any case, the main key of the BOOST approach was that to see it as a school project in that everyone was involved in. The support of a school leadership, the connection with family, the joint work was admit easier for adults to assume that it is a school project that is the main key, no? And also the meeting with all the staff, the opportunity to share impression, to discuss pros and cons have been an opportunity to grow together in Spanish schools. We have found two main difficulties in the practice of both approach: the lack of time of teachers, recognize that they have available to deal with the social and emotional learning and the use of the platform, but it was left as an extra task. In this case, stakeholders recognize the relevance of the topic, but also consider that they don't always have to time, for example, if they have to combine with academic subjects like language or mathematics. We have to take into account also the impact of the COVID and the pandemic in the philosophy of the schools. The most of them consider that the lockdown, it was very relevant, that promote a very important point to recover for the impact of the social isolation that children lived. In fact, our results highlight that the high level of social and emotional competence boost resilience after the pandemic. But for example, one of the Spanish schools considered that they didn't want to continue to participate because they didn't have time to put attention to this topic. No? And in summary, the BOOST approach has introduced significant changes in Spanish schools, but the specific characteristics of the context have also been considered to adapt the model designed to improve to impact the life of students. It has been the difficulty, and it has been also the challenge.
Thanks a lot. Yes,
I would like to add that very useful aspect from our perspective in Polish context were workshops for teachers outside the schools, because teachers and non-pedagogical staff had more space and times for reflection arenas, and they have many possibilities to exchange their experiences, cooperate, support each other, and these meetings improve their self-efficacy and support their well-being and psychological condition. And it's very important, and because we organize such workshop for experimental school staff, we prepare additional workshops during our conference before the end of March. And I think that it's very important, as Robert mentioned, real contact and meeting and the possibility to exchange different experiences and listen to each other.
Indeed. And I mean, we'll also touch again on the work that you did in March to further promote in the second part of this panel, where we look at what's next, basically what we can take and how we can adapt. You want to add something? There we go to Niels. Yes.
Just in terms of the context that Agatha already mentioned, I wanted to add something that is not based on the research, but on daily experience. We were mentioning already the war and the Ukrainian refugees. And what I wanted to say, because it feels relevant for me, you probably don't feel it, but we live as neighbors in Polish schools in Wrocław. And something happened that never happened in Polish social landscape earlier on. Suddenly we hear a foreign language on the street. We hear the foreign language on the playground. So there's heaps of the kids from Ukraine that became part of our society, that entered our schooling system, and it changed. And on one hand, it's excellent that they can escape from the war zone and that we can host them. On the other hand, on the dark side of the moon, you hear from Polish parents like comments, so yeah, we have these Ukrainian kids and there's no space for my kid at school. So it's already a ground for complaints, for discrimination, for activation of stereotypes, biases, and prejudices. So it's a very challenging situation. And I think we have to keep it in our mind that it's a difficult context.
Indeed. And I mean, talking about context, but also looking at it from an external perspective, Niels, you were part of the advisory board of the Boost project. So you look at the project in its entirety from outside. So, of course you heard and you know about the Boost approach, but from your perspective, what's the highlights of what's the key things that you look at as an innovative?
Yeah, I'd love to share my experiences from the advisory board, but first I also like to explain just a wee background for you to understand why I'm so enthusiastic about the Boost approach. And I'm a pediatrician and a school physician and a former manager of a pediatric outpatient department. And I'm from the Euriga part of you, from representative of the southern tip of Sweden with 1.4 million inhabitants. And I'm also a former manager for the school health services in my city, as well as for the health and welfare for the pregnant and newly parents up to 6 years of age. And in my clinical world, I met a lot of adolescents with suicidal thoughts and deep depressive. And I was always thinking, what can I do to actually prevent that from the beginning? So then I was a leader of a scientific project that was looking at the circular complex with a good health is a good base for education, but also success in school is, as we heard before, the best vaccine to mental health, against mental health. So I entered this advisory board with that experience with very big enthusiasm, but also a large proportion of anxiety, because the only experience of cell I had before was a thesis in Sweden, which was presented in 2015 by the Swedish National Agency of Education. And those are quite a strong institute in Sweden, of course, and we'll listen to what they say. And that thesis showed that the problems of the cell programs, because they were universal and led to negative consequences to a lot of students for whom the programs were not intended in the beginning. And it also put a strong focus on the deficiency to be addressed to individuals, and then that could be neglect to put the diagnosis on the system instead of putting diagnosis on the individual. So that anxiety actually stayed up until October last year, because then the Swedish Agency for Health Assessment performed a systematic review of those mental well-being programs like CEL. And they actually saw a medium effect on students' social emotional competences regarding relationships competence, resilience, self-awareness, self-control. So then my anxiety disappeared quite late, however. But if I'm going to, this is not any rocket science, but from my part of view of the board, of the advisory board, if I look at it on a rather like a SWOT perspective with strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we can of course see the extreme strengths in entering the school arena where we reach all children, 100% of children, we can reach them, and that's an enormous good arena. And also working within the context of education. Of course, that is also good, because then we have professionals how to educate, and then they can educate the children. And then if you go to the opportunities, again, being within the educational framework, we have a lot of opportunities to make changes. But also in this framework, we can actually reach out for the parents as well, not only for approval of being into the research program of participation, but also being active. And this was pointed out from the advisory board and also together with Johannes Tainer from the European Parents Association. And that's a cliffhanger because I know you're later on this afternoon. But then, of course, we have some weaknesses. And the major weakness is coming from the outside into the school system on a 90-degree angle, means that everybody wants to get into the school arena because it's a good arena with questionnaires, with interventions, with whatever. But no teacher wants to leave 10 minutes of the math lesson or of the Spanish lesson for this purpose. That is a big challenge, and I'll come back later on to that on the threat part. But also the challenge is implementing health promotive activities, because we have so many confounding factors on a scientific basis. So that is a weakness. And the threat, of course, we heard, apart from strikes, COVID, which is, I mean, we can't do anything about threats or war in Ukraine. We can do something, but not so much in a small part. But also the sustainability, which we'll come back later on. But then we need to think from a teacher point of view, what's in it for me? And I think we'll also discuss that from the advisory board, to look for the teacher, what's in it for me if I'm leaving 10 minutes from my Swedish lesson? What is there for me? And I would bring back that on the other part.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Niels. I mean, great to indeed hear, you know, where you're coming with your experience before, like what we were expecting also from the Boost project. But and moving indeed into, you know, what now in a way. We'll extensively talk about what now also from the, let's say, the policy perspective point of view later this afternoon. But you know, coming back to you, Agata, you already pre-mentioned a little bit of work that you've been doing with stakeholders in Poland, so to kind of increase, you know, the acceptance in a way from about the Boost project. You had a meeting in March, if I'm not wrong. So what's your learning from it? So how do you see the appetite from taking it further?
The acceptance of the Boost approach and its positive perception can be seen in our cooperation not only with Faculty of Pedagogy, Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, but with superintendents of education voivodeship, Wielkopolska voivodeship, with Elżbieta and vice superintendents Alessandra, and we took part many times in special meetings once a year. Superintendent organized such meetings with head teachers of primary, secondary school, and we fortunately had possibilities to describe our results from the project. And Teacher Training Center, it is official state organization responsible for training teachers in Wielkopolska voivodeships. And the cooperation confirms that our project is perceived as important. It was the reasons that we organized such conference with Faculty of Pedagogy, Adam Mickiewicz University, and it was perceived, these meetings, this conference, it was perceived by the participant, both researchers and teachers, with great enthusiasm, especially panel discussion. Robert led this panel discussion, and our workshops proposal, because we organized a few workshops about 5-step approach, about well-being of teachers and resilience of teachers, and overall the feedback from the teachers confirms that social and emotional learning as significant as didactic process. It is the very important thing.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. And before I go to Eva, also, of course, we're a little bit late, but we'll still have some time for some questions. So if you have something to ask to our colleagues, please do start thinking about it, and I'll come to you in a bit. Eva, same thing, but for the Spanish contest. So how do you see, let's say, the next step, the acceptance overall from your context, which is indeed different, as we've seen?
Yeah, thank you. We believe that thinking about the future of the BUS approach in Spain requires to consider two main points. First, this approach assumes that implementing a model is designed to stay in the schools. It is not a program with a beginning and the end, unless we have worked to give strategies to ensure that the model continues in the day-to-day. For this reason, training in decision-making and learning strategies to improve on their own is what ensures that BUS continue. Second, in the next step, we are working closely with local policymakers to disseminate the model. BUS represents a new way of understanding teacher training. Currently, the national government also has approved a new law. It's established the obligation to address social and emotional problems and the presence of the figure of the well-being coordinator in schools. One of the main problems that we are finding is that this action, teachers don't know how to learn to carry out. We are in contact for this reason with the designer of teacher training action in our region, precisely because BUS is a new way of understanding teacher training that should be disseminated. This month also we have participated in different meetings with teachers from the community. We have planned a meeting with advisory teachers to the next week to discuss about how to disseminate this model in school. And we will have a meeting in September with the school leaderships teams to encourage them to put in practice in their schools. We feel also that this meeting is very important because it is the way to ensure that it is a school project. Another important point, which we are studying defining how to implement, is how to put in practice the trainer of trainees. It involves established networks of people who train other school staff to implement the BUS approach. We could organize different meetings between the current BUS teachers to spread the approach to other teachers. It could mean moving from a whole school approach to a whole community approach. What do we need? Motivation, involvement of teachers, institutional support to establish this socio-emotional network, European consortia to build together the next step. In summary, we have defined what BUS stands for, what it entails to the potential benefits, how to implement, and we are working to that educational decision makers see the need for this approach by a broader view.
Thanks a lot, Eva. I mean, you mentioned already how also complex it is to then take the next steps, because it includes, you know, the local dimension, teachers, education, the European perspective as well. And on these, I would like to come to you, Niels, again. You know, how do you think that, also listening to the colleagues back, how does the Boost approach fit in the overall discussion on SEL at the European dimension, or if you have any other perspective on this?
Yeah, I think I leave that to Gloria. But I'll try, if I go back to again, before we go on the European level, if I try just to see that what's in it for me again, on each individual teacher. So when a teacher might find out that maybe the cell makes my group a bit calmer, or makes my group work better, makes even my group of students get better results, then I'm convinced that this is something to work with. And I can tell my colleague in the next classroom how this works and how I can do it. So I can, it's like a virus. Yeah, I can get that to the next. But then I also need a headmaster, a school leader, who is not only giving an okay, but also committed to this work. So I can feel free that it's okay to work with cell in my classroom. But then we also need to work on the political level to make sure, and this we pointed out in that advisory group, and this is not rocket science, but we need to work on all those levels in order to put this more sustainable and lobbying up very hard. And unfortunately now my MP just disappeared. So we had
I think she definitely gave her ability to be lobbying. So I think she's actually talking to one of the convinced in this case.
That's right.
So it's going to be fairly easy.
We had 365 more. But also at the same time, we need also to reflect on what does it look like in different in a scientific way. And Robert was just telling us about how that you were finding out in all corners in the world what was doing. But I was ending up with an Erasmus hand-in-hand project that was almost parallel to the Boost project. And it was a project with Germany, Sweden, Slovenia, and Croatia to strengthen social and emotional competences to increase well-being and improve students' health. So I thought, oh, that looked like the Boost approach. So, but this was also pointed out from the advisory board to the Boost consortium. But of course, there is an enormous challenge on the European level, because we have all those different laws and regulations in each country. And that's a challenge to find some common ground to work with, but also within the same country. We have also so many different, within the same legal system, we have all the different between different communities, and even the same communities between different schools. So even in a community, it's like Europe. Every community is like Europe when you look at schools. So of course that is an immense challenge to work with. I imagine we will hear more about those challenges later on this afternoon, but also from Gloria will give us the answer. But I know that Ketty Lundemon also will be presenting some interesting things. That's another cliffhanger for the afternoon.
It's a lot of spoilers. but yeah, coming indeed to you, Gloria, to close this panel before we have some question. Indeed, you were also part of the coordination team of the Boost approach, and of course it's a European collaboration. So what you can like bring to discussion additionally from the European perspective, let's say, and the connection in a way.
What this has, I think, what we have developed was takes into consideration what you said about spreading like a virus. What we're trying to do is for schools to work together, not from one to one to one, but together to develop the skills of all school staff and children at the same time. What it means is that like this, the theme of this panel, which was basically context. How did it affect this context and this context? And we see that every context is different, and even within the same country, within the same neighborhood. So what we try to do is that with the boost approach was that each context would grab the approach, make it their own, and at the same time work with social emotional learning and give the school staff what they asked for, which was opportunities to learn and opportunities to make tools for themselves that they need at the time when they need it. Not to have a tool from Poland that doesn't fit in Norway, or Norway that doesn't fit in Poland, or Spain, but every community takes the boost approach and makes it their own. And that's why we concentrated so much on, and I think what we've achieved, I think, can be very successful across the many contexts in Europe. And that's how
while keeping in mind that the context is changes, so it's not
as
really
well.
just a copy paste
No, I mean,
exercise,
look at
basically.
the Polish context. It changed. Yes, strikes were probably always part of your life, but you did not have a war on your doorstep at the time. That was not something that just came, a virus that came out of nowhere. So I mean, we were dealing with a constantly changing context in different contexts.
Indeed, and now there are even new words to define this perma crisis, poly crisis thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's not gonna wait. Probably like people already know that they're gonna be in crisis, and I mean let's change this context in a way. So yeah, so I don't know if we have some questions from the audience once there, and in the meantime, if you want to add something, please.
Yes, I would like to add one more thing, because we discussed about different level of cooperation on European level, international, regional, national level, local level. I think that preparing material for platform inspired us, our team, to prepare materials for teachers, not only for Polish teachers, but international teachers too, because we prepare all 28 modules in English version and Polish version, electronic version. Generally, Polish teachers are very critical and reflective, and they required evidence-based materials, and it was remedy. Our materials is remedy for such needs. And I think that when our project will be closed, our science and tracks will be spread out. Our different organizations and different levels of our cooperation. And I think that because of our cooperation, our contact, not only formal contact, as Robert mentioned, but non-formal contact and different reflection arenas, we can cooperate and prepare many useful things for our well-being and pupils' well-being and teachers' well-being and head teachers' well-being.
Thanks a lot, Agatha.
Thanks.
We have one there, and then I'll be coming with the second mic, please.
Okay, hi, thank you very much. My name is Sebastian Lind. I'm from Eurochild. And yeah, this is a very interesting panel and discussion. I was just wondering how much, like we've heard a lot about the adult perspective now, and I was just wondering how much have you included the children in this, because they're the ones that in the end profit from all of this, and they're the ones that can tell you best how they feel about their mental health, how their mental health is. And so, yeah, to what extent have you consulted them in the process? And if you haven't done so, I would strongly recommend you to ask for feedback from the children themselves to see how they actually take it. Thank you.
I can start with I cannot talk about the impact. I think maybe Poland has better call on that, but in the development of the approach in the formative study, we did several workshops with children to see what it is they needed in a social emotional learning approach. So that aspect was taken care of in the formative study, which we all did, and we all interviewed children, actually. But the impact, I can't say I can talk about that because we have totally different implementation strategies in the 3 countries. So.
I would like to add that at the beginning of the project, we conducted a many focus group discussion with pupils from different schools, not the same school as participated as control and experimental, but from Wielkopolska voivodeships. And we took into account their needs, their perspective about school atmosphere, their social emotional needs, many different issues. And it was very, very useful, especially at the beginning when we decided which component of our boost approach would be the most useful for pupils.
Yeah, I would like to add that we have put in practice an indirect work with children. We have done through teachers and the different staff. Is the way to ensure that the model is in the school because they are the person who are with them day to day.
I have a question to you. Thank you for an interesting this discussion. You mentioned about context differences between countries, but the nature of human being is the same. So I would like to ask you, maybe you will, can give in some words the most universal problems and the most universal effects of in different contexts and implementing so, because it will be very important in my opinion to advise it to all countries with this different maybe tools, or maybe the same tools, I don't know, but I would like to know from you exactly what are the most universal from your point of view.
I think that when I'd like to, in the best way, support children as a teacher or educators, the first I need to take care of my well-being. I think it's the first step. It's the universal, because during our workshop, teachers told us many times that it's very important and it's necessary for them. During focus group discussion, repeated the same issue that supporting their social, psychological condition, their well-being, resilience, it's necessary. And many different programs, international programs, focus on only children, focus on children. But sometimes teachers it's treated as a tool. Yeah. I think it's my perspective.
Now, I would say that this is the universal is the child development from the small child up to the adulthood, and the small child. Every children is very dependent on the context, and the small child is family context definitely. And then you start socializing with equals or same age group, and then at the beginning that's universal as well. How you interact with other people. And then particularly then when you come up in adolescence, then of course the group becomes more important in one part of the adolescent rather than the family. We talked earlier how all teenagers are ashamed of their parents, aren't they? Until you realize that your parents, they were quite okay anyway. So it's all, that's universal. So then of course it's always dependent on what age you're focusing on.
was that?
As you voiced the universality, I had pretty recently a very interesting discussion with students. The main theme was, is there any universal approach to make our communication easier, to click, to connect with people? Is there a universal approach that is good? And I'm personally quite confused, because part of the discussion was that what seems to be, or what I hoped is the universal approach, the humanistic, psychological, Rogerian approach, which I thought is universal, was questioned. And just an example, for example, we we talk so much about empathy, about empathizing, about taking another person's perspective, about, and it's actually an entering of another person's intimate world. And we think it's good from our cultural perspective. But there are cultures where such an empathic journey could be perceived as from the partner's perspective as an invasion, unwanted, aggressive invasion into the personal world, unique world of the person. If Rogers talks around like a broken record about congruence, about being emotionally expressive and real, there are cultures where we have to be emotionally reserved. We have to be very self-contained emotionally, and affective, emotional, expressive way of being could be perceived as inappropriate. So it's absolutely not an easy question. Do we have an rights to call our approach universal? It's highly questionable issue. And the second thing that I will voice, but you'll probably hate me for it, but what the hell, I would take a risk. It's a final conference, I don't give it.
You're quite close to the exit there.
We're gonna cut this from the...
Don't take me wrong. I really try to be this way, for example, in spite of my failures, and the failures are painful because they happen even in my personal life. But I still believe that this is the way I would like to be with other people. And I try in spite of failures. But as we focus so much on this issue, part of me is anxious and afraid that maybe we are entering the phase or stage of self-dictatorship, or like a political correctness phase, that if you don't know Rogers and Sell and Goleman, you better watch yourself. You have to. So the moment something becomes a coercion, the moment something becomes a politically correct, no other choice or option, no alternative, that's the moment when I become a little bit anxious and uncomfortable, because I personally hate the dictatorships and authoritarian personalities, a difficulty for me. So part of me is quite anxious that we may consciously and unconsciously impose our points of view. I mean, we worked so much on it, it became, as Agatha often says, the boost is in our blood. It circulates. After those 6 years, we are walking boosts. Examples. So to what extent it's an extremely interesting experience, but to what extent it actually narrows our vision in a way that can potentially bring some risk. That's just what I wanted to share with you.
That's in general, a good example for like many European initiative and projects. You tend to, focus so much on what you're working on that, again, sometimes it just sucks you. Maybe before coming to you, maybe I'll just have the last question from the audience, so you can also come back to the last question.
Yeah.
And then we close for lunch, which I see there.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this project. For this, it's really interesting. I'm Chiara Piccolo. I work from Learning for Wellbeing Foundation. And I'm also being selected from the European Commission for the informal working group on well-being at school. And one of the goals of this working group is actually to introduce, as learning goal, a learning object, the well-being of kids and children in school. So this means a side of learning how to write, how to read, or and the rest, and all the academic knowledge. There is also the well-being. And we are working actually also on a universal approach of social and emotional learning, how to integrate this knowledge into curricula. Because so far, and what we have found and all the results they achieved, and how to increase competencies of teachers and school staff in dealing and creating a better relationship with students in order to increase their own competences to learn. So which are the barriers, since you have been in touch with the school staff, teachers, to include this learning into curricula, into didactics, into really the daily activities in the school lessons, in the classroom activities in school? Which are the barriers that you can foresee for teachers, for schools, at political level to change curricula according to this, and what could be the enables to include this curricula into school activities, aside of be an extracurricular activities? Thank you.
Oh, wow. I think I like it's a very complex question, but I really think I would like to handle that one. What are the barriers to include a program into a let's say, with the caveat that the political level is in place, because that's coming later on. That is super important, because if the teachers and schools aren't given the opportunity to work with this, then they won't work with it because they have other priorities. So that's the caveat we have in place. Yeah, the barriers, which I feel this we tried to address, was exactly the barriers are that not everything fits everyone. That's the biggest barrier. That what we thought, and I mean, your modules, for example, addressed something that's universal. For example, how mental health develops and how children grow and become into beings and think for themselves. But that was not what was important for some schools. They weren't there. They needed materials for something else related to social emotional learning, but they weren't interested in that. They were interested in something else. So I think for, at least from my perspective, I found the biggest barrier was that every school and even every teacher needs something different. That's why we try to do something with an approach that would be locally based and to address exactly that. I find that to be the barrier, but I don't know what the other opinions are here.
I think there are many barriers actually, because in Sweden 2 mandates ago, a lot of schools had started life knowledge, which was made in half class, and the kids loved it because then they talked and they learned and they talked about things that concerned them in the daytime. But then the political level said, no, there's not going to be any life knowledge in school. Point. End of question. So it was taken away. And as you said, that doesn't fit everyone, because if you have the sexual education, for example, the poor biology teachers has to stand there getting more nervous to talk with sex because this person doesn't fit him. And so this is a challenge that the school is working with all the time.
One more thing before Agatha takes I was just thinking about, when in relation to that, I was thinking about in the model that we created, we gave opportunities for reflection. So exactly, the biology teacher could go to this place and say, I am not cut out for this. What am I supposed to do here? You know, so it would be an arena where they shared experiences and shared different tools that they use and different learning things, and each one would adapt it to what they really needed for their classroom and for the school itself. So we'll go ahead, sorry.
Yes, I think that, thanks. I think that it's connect with mindset of teachers, that it is possible to connect didactic process with supporting children. and social and emotional learning. And our teachers during focus group discussion and interviews told us that at the beginning of the project they work intuitively in such social and emotional learning. But before the end of project, they are aware of this importance that is possible to interweave, to build and rebuild this curriculum and didactic process. And the second important aspect is policy, educational policy, because the priorities, exam marks, rankings, and grades, and each head teachers and schools focus on such priority. Marks, exams, rankings, yes. And I think that when we discuss about some results and children's needs, that these competences, social and emotional competences, as necessary to their not only learning, but their health, not mental health, but to survive in such difficult situation as war, pandemic, yes. And
yeah. I would like to add a thing, because it's relevant, the policymaker support. It's relevant also that it is introduced into the activities, into the model of the school. But it's also important that they believe in it. How they can believe in it? First, thinking that I can be effective doing it, and then showing that it is it impact in social development of children. And perhaps we start to think about and why we are not getting the result or the expected result that we would like, no? And perhaps we need to go further to the development of specific skills that does not ensure that children put in practice, and start to think about holistic model that impact the life of children.
There's a last comment from another one of our
It's just a brief comment, because when we talk about the whole, so I'm the Johannes that Nils already introduced, a little bit a cross view on everything. I think that we should also see the complexity of policy making when we look into the school laws and the areas of action. It's not only the curriculum. You asked for the curriculum. It's not only the curriculum. It is the school life. So the school laws typically have some kind of introductory preambles that tell you about the ethics, and that's one very important place to put the intention that were critically relative by Robert, but I think you're right. It's important not to make it a dictation. And then we have the way of additional areas of learning that are not typically classroom situations, and what you mentioned, the problems of grading and valuing the achievements. So we should keep this big picture when we talk about whole school approach, and you mentioned the word holistic. It's deserved by this project.
And the final 30 seconds, because I think the holistic perspective, as a school physician, every day I talk to teachers and I remind them that you produce health every bloody lesson. That's so important. That was so good to find out the Boost project, because you take care of the teachers. There were teachers that went to the labor union in Sweden because they were going to talk about mental health and particularly suicide prevention, and they refused to do that. They said, we're not competent to do this, so that the school nurse and the school counselor should do that instead. But if you have a confident teachers that know, yeah, I make difference every day. I look my children in the eyes, and every day I make a difference. I ask myself every evening when I come home, I look at myself in the mirror and said, well, did you do any difference today? and said, well, I smiled to know later on the bus home.
It's already something. No. So thanks a lot. A round of applause for our
No. One more sentence, only 2 seconds. I'm very grateful for each member of my team, Robert, Eva, Ida, Ola, not only for all works they did, but for creating a warm and supportive atmosphere. Thanks a lot, my colleagues.
Thanks
my colleagues too. Rocio and Olga.
I think we'll have a final picture at the end, so we'll have the chance to to thank everybody. So yes, we are a bit late. Apologies for that. Lunch, it's there, so please do help yourself. We have some sandwiches for all of you. We'll start again, I would say, well, a little bit later than they expected, around 1:45 at the very latest, maybe, so we can carve a little bit more time for lunch and discussion. The posters about the Boost project are also there, so feel free to engage with the colleagues from the consortium and have a chat and enjoy the lunch.